Well, hello, class. As I had mentioned a few minutes ago, this is actually going to be a video that's going to be covering chapters 4, 5, and 6, the material content. So, as we go into these chapters, begin to think about terms. Uh, First term that I want to talk about is the elasticity of prices and also the inelasticity. So, think about the factors of supply and demand and think about how prices as they're elastic, meaning okay that they either increase or they decline by a substantial amount. The opposite of that would be inelastic, meaning that prices do not change considerably. And begin to think about that. Begin to think about the demands of production and how that affects the demand for production. And also, another thing is think about how, even with consumers, okay, how do consumers respond to that? So, quantity in terms of distribution, and then, of course, on the side of distribution, do those prices, okay, become more elastic? I know that's contingent upon the nature and the condition of the economy as well. Of course, you have to understand that we're in business to make a profit. So, if you distribute a product and if it happens to be on a quantity or mass amount, well, then there's a price that you're going to want to determine per unit. And that price could be elastic, meaning, okay, that it's going to either increase or decrease drastically, or the price will be inelastic, meaning that it's not going to change substantially. So, for example, with what we're going through right now, with this whole entire COVID-19 crisis and pandemic, okay, you have to ask, okay, how is that going to impact distributors? How's that going to impact retailers, manufacturers? How's that going to also impact consumers as well? I think, be honest with you, on the consumer side, the buying process, okay, is going to change drastically. It depends on what type of good or product. For example, I have to go back again, use the example of sanitizer and also sanitizing wipes, hand sanitizers, disinfectant sprays such as Lysol, Clorox, those kind of things. Also, the use of bleach, any type of sanitizing product is going to really have a major impact. And so, what we'll probably notice, and what you probably notice as you're going into stores, is that retailers, what they've done is that they've actually increased the price, okay, per product when it comes to these various products that I just mentioned. That's an example of elasticity. Okay. Inelastic, of course, as I just mentioned, those will be products that do not change substantially in terms of price. And we've probably noticed some things, even with this pandemic, that has transpired and taken place, that some, but very few, prices have remained inelastic, meaning that they have not changed drastically. So begin to think about that as you review the material regarding inelasticities and also elasticities of prices. Some terms to remember is total revenue, also unit price elastic, and then what I just mentioned, price elastic and inelastic. Also begin to think about how consumers again respond, okay, to what manufacturers, distributors, and retailers actually happen to put out there. Moving on to the next thing here, okay, we want to talk about markets. Okay, so when we think about market, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Okay, market has everything to do with buying behavior. All right, so that's something to keep in mind. So, from a consumer's perspective, how are markets impacted? What type of market? Is there a maximization? Is there a benefit? Is there a cost? Is there a profit? Those are things that are centered around, okay, markets and how consumers actually engage in different types of behavior regarding that. So, some terms to remember regarding that would be economic profit. That's the difference between total revenue and total cost. Now, There's marginal benefits, and there's a marginal decision, and there's a marginal cost that's set behind the behavior of that. So, marginal benefit, that would be an additional unit if activity happens to increase within the total benefit. Or marginal cost, that would be the amount by which an additional unit of an activity increases its total cost. And marginal decision, that's the rule that states that if marginal benefit of an additional unit of an activity exceeds the marginal cost, the quantity of the activity should be increased. So if the marginal benefit is less than the marginal cost, then the quantity should be reduced. Let me kind of put this more in layman's terms: supply and demand. Of course, if there is a demand for a product, then what's going to happen? Okay, the supply is going to increase. If the demand is less, then of course the supply is going to decrease along with that. So also there's constraints to go along with that, boundaries that limit the range of choices that can also be made. So just kind of think about these terms and definitions and how they actually impact the marketplace. Of course, who keeps the marketplace going? We know that consumers, are really the final and determining factor. Everything is centered around the consumer. The consumer is who brings economic gain to the retailer, and then it's just the chain of command. You have the manufacturers and the distributors that get the products out to the retailers. Another thing to remember, would be property rights, when achieving efficiency. So, property rights, for example, when you actually own something, what are exclusive property rights? For example, those are property rights, that remain in the sole possession of the owner, or what could be transferable, in terms of a property right. And so think about assets, that a company or that a business would happen to own. All right. So what could, for example, the owner of a business, what could they transfer over? In so many words, maybe sell, or another word for sell would be liquidate. Maybe to pay off some other debt, or what will that owner exclusively keep? Meaning that that's an asset that's attributed towards the business or the company themselves, and that property would never actually transfer over. It would remain in the sole possession of the business owner. Some more terms to remember regarding markets would be consumer surplus. That's the amount by which total benefits to consumers from consuming a good actually exceeds their total expenditures on the good. And then the producer surplus, that would be the difference between the total revenue that's received by sellers as well as their total cost. And so some points to remember regarding this. In a market that satisfies the efficiency condition, we're talking about efficiency and equity within the market. And efficient allocation of resources will emerge from any particular distribution of income. Also, different income distributions will result in different but still efficient outcomes. And so whatever distribution society chooses, an efficient allocation of resources is still preferred to an inefficient one. And then, of course, one of the things that's a main concern here, what we're currently experiencing again with this pandemic, is a failure within the market overall. Any type of market that's centered around and built around the economy. Retail markets, the real estate market, the stock market. We have to look at different markets. Those are examples right there of different markets. So market failure would occur when a private decision, in the marketplace fails to achieve an efficient allocation of scarce resources. So scarcity, if you remember, I talked about that last week. The main concern that a lot of individuals are dealing with right now is the scarcity of products. And again, I have to go back to the sanitizers and the disinfectant sprays, okay, things that will keep us safe or that will prevent us from getting coronavirus. The one thing, though, that those that are engaging in the market for profit, they do not want to experience market failure, okay? That could lead to a decline within business, a shutdown within the business. I think really within the service industry, we've experienced that where a lot of restaurants, as a result of being closed over the last 2 months due to COVID-19, a lot of small business owners, not just in the restaurant industry, they have not been able to reopen and they will not reopen. So those are some things to really think about. Also, some final terms that we need to embark on would be public goods. So, a good that's public, all right, that's a good for which the cost of exclusion is prohibitive and for which the marginal cost of another user is positive. Whereas with the private good, that's a good for which exclusion is possible and for which the marginal cost of another user happens to be positive. And then free riders are people or firms that consume a public good without actually paying for it. Okay, so moving on, we want to talk about one more topic, and I'm just kind of brazing the surface. These are things that we can begin to store up within our memory bank as we begin to further progress within week 2. Let's look at the production and the cost, and also the market cost. So, again, production choices and cost. Okay, let's first of all look at the short run effect and impact that may have. So the short run would be defined as a planning period. That's which managers of a firm must consider one or more of their factors of production as fixed within quantity. So the fixed factor of production, give you an example of that, would be when there's quantity that cannot be changed during a particular period. Whereas with the variable factor of production, that's a factor whose quantity can be changed during a particular period. So whatever is being produced in mass quantity, the fixed, okay, would not be changed. So that quantity amount would remain the same. But however, though, in a variable factor of the production of any products, what we'll see and we'll experience is that there will be a change, either increase or a decrease within the quantity that's actually being produced and for output. So in the long run, within the planning period itself, a firm can consider all factors of production as being a variable. So just with your cost, for example, you have fixed cost, you have variable cost that pertain to running a business, running a company, for example. There's going to be things that are going to have a fixed cost. They're not going to change. But for variables, they're going to increase or they're going to decrease. So a few things regarding the output of this. All right, let's kind of look at firms. So firms experiencing increasing marginal returns, okay? When there's a range, for example, over each additional unit of a variable factor, it adds more to the total output than the previous input. That's for increasing marginal returns. Diminishing marginal returns, that's when the range over which each additional unit of a variable factor adds less to the total output than the previous input. And in negative marginal returns, that's when the range over which additional units of variable factor reduce total output, but it also gives constant quantities of all other factors. So the law of diminishing marginal returns, it states that the marginal product of any variable factor of product will eventually decline, assuming that the quantities of other factors of productions go unchanged. And then I want to talk about the difference between economies and diseconomies. All right. So economies of scale refers to a situation in where you have a long run and the average of that cost declines, as the firm expands its output, where the diseconomies refers to a situation in which the long run, the average of the cost can increase as the firm expands as its output. The constant returns of scale refers to a situation in which the long run average cost stays the same over a desired output range. All right, so all of these are used to gauge output and input. All right, and it's determined whether the cost is going to remain fixed or if there's going to be a variable, an adjustment within cost. And one of the things that you'll notice with this, when companies actually exercise their quarterly budgets, okay, they're using economies and diseconomies of scales. They're using variable and fixed cost. They're looking at the marginal returns as well too, that they will get out of producing output of these products when they're dealing with a quantity amount or a mass amount. Okay, just some terms that I just wanted to go over regarding Chapter 2. As I said, always, what I'm going to provide for you guys is lecturettes. It will probably be no more than 20 minutes long covering the course material. So begin to think about these different terms covering chapters 4, 5, and 6. Just a reminder, everybody, for those that have not done the discussion questions yet for week 2, we're going to push that back. The due date is going to be Tuesday, this Tuesday, for those discussion questions that are going to be centered around chapter 2. And the reason why I did that again was that everybody can enjoy the holiday weekend. And I hope that everybody does enjoy their weekend as we've already progressed into it. Okay, if you have any questions, again, I have heard from some students. Feel free to reach out to me. If it's an emergency, you can call me or send me a text message, or you can communicate by me with email. I try to respond to my emails in less than 24 hours. Sometimes I've actually hit the 24-hour marking period. But I can reassure everybody this. I can reassure you that would never be more than 1 day in terms of responding to emails. But the best thing, though, if you want me to respond immediately, because I'm not on email 24 hours a day, is to send me a text message. My number is listed under my signature email. Okay, everybody. All right. Blessings for the remaining part of your Sunday, and also blessings for tomorrow and the remainder of the week. I'll be talking to you soon.